Burn the Box, a portal to the world of hidden truths and untapped power. A sanctuary where together we unmask the oppression hidden in the shadows far too long. Unscripted, unplanned, unrehearsed. Stay tuned for powerful conversations, thought-provoking insights as we ignite the sacred rebellion of the global majority. Let's begin this incredible journey together. Welcome to Burn the Box. Your host, Dr. Sonali Deepika.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Burn the Box. And today I have with me my friend and colleague and someone who's definitely become a sister to me over the last almost 3 years of meeting every week. We've gotten to meet in person as well. This is Saumya Kaup, who is a psychotherapist and a practitioner of somatic abolitionism. Welcome, Saumya.
Thank you.
So good to be recording this with you. So, as I often like to start, just to get us going, I know we can talk for hours, but with regards to burning boxes, I'm curious what feels alive for you now in your life, in the world, with regards to expanding out of constricted spaces, with regards to shedding our conditioning, anything along those lines.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I feel probably my whole life I've been told to be in a constrictive space, right? Okay, the rigidity of my culture, of that my Indian parents that immigrated here and were trying to stay true to what they knew. And so I had this dual culture of being in the United States and being in India for 4 months out of the year. And it was, I feel a lot of times I look back on that and just feel like I was confused a lot. What is right? What is right? I think it led the way to, and then I really noticed what gave me ease in those moments. You know, I think I shared before, pretty volatile household and how I found ease, but also really recognizing the patterns that were created, what happened, you know, kind of along the way. And then this last 3 years of us being together and doing this work, somatic abolitionism with Resma and other lovely instructors, like it feels, and the community, it's surprising to me after this many decades of me doing this work that new stuff showed up. And so wow, it's this wow moment of like, well, there's so much in my time on this earth that has still not been unraveled. And I've been doing this self-awareness work for almost 30 years now. So like, it's like, wow. And it led me to kids because I felt like I didn't have that adult in my life that kind of said, this is not how life needs to be. Like this level of rigidity and suffering and not being yourself and having all those family masks. And I gravitated towards kids in a way of like, okay, if I can't do this for myself, at least I can work with children and help them just feel comfortable in their own sense of self. And so that I feel strongly that that's still the path, but now having a little bit more understanding of myself and kind of what I can understand about myself now more than I did 3 years ago. And you and I have talked about kind of like being in, you know, kind of shining, and what shining meant to a South Asian culture is not looked upon well. to put it kindly.
To pick on, yes.
The purpose hasn't changed. I feel like it's very strongly helping children with to find their sense of self. What I've noticed in the last few years is so much of this was not focused on race. So much of my work was not focused on race or culture.
Yeah.
And it wasn't intentional. It's again part of the system that we talk about, that I knew my own stuff. I just didn't kind of put it on working with kids on their own self-awareness.
Right.
And I didn't shy away from it when it showed up, but I would say this feels very different because it's very tangible for them to look at what's happening for them. And kids are amazing because they can be super visual, and they haven't gotten all our layers of societal norms yet. And even in their deep trauma, they can say, even if they don't have the words, they can tell me what the image is. They can tell me energetically what's happening. So a lot of my work right now is developing how to make this more age appropriate for them. And another piece I would say is just recently it showed up again working with South Asian women.
Yes.
That showed up a really, really big way this week. So, yeah. But I feel I take all of the pieces, all of my meditation stuff and all of my spiritual pieces, all of the pieces of this work, and just integrate it. I call it like a deep well, right? Because then you can all of these pieces when they're needed.
Wow. It's really powerful work. As we were exploring, as we were in the course together, which, ended at the end of last year, but we were seeing with each of us, and actually with a lot of people in our group, how uniquely this work was showing up for each person. It's like, here's somatic abolitionism. Here's something that's quite vast and quite charged in our bodies, and then that question came in the second class, the second part of the course that we took, where it's like, well, how do you want to, where the invitation came up, like, how do you want to share this now? Now you're in these spaces and you're working in small groups and we're working together. How does that want to come through now? As it's coming to me, it's like, how does that want to come through each of our bodies with our own experiences, with our own histories, our families, our perspectives? It's been beautiful to witness how that's come through for you. I mean, you were already working with children, but now to bring in different layers, different aspects in the well, as you mentioned.
I wonder for you as well, but I feel with therapy, I work with a lot of different populations, mostly unresourced population in Baltimore. And I notice I'm not othered in the work, right? Like I don't have one South Asian client in my work, but I always feel that authenticity really lands deeply no matter what the difference in culture. And I feel like when you were speaking, that is what it lends itself to, like working together years and working in this community for 3 years. It's not Resma's way, right? Like to give this gift of, it's like his child, right? It's like such a gift. And then I get to digest that, embody, calibrate to that. And then it's in the well, right? It's in this deep place, and I can pull from it, right? It's not going to show up the way it shows up for you when you're working with people and you're kind of guiding this work I think that's beautiful. If you tell me that you need me to do a meditation class tonight, I would pull from this deep well of,
Yeah.
of practice. I think the beauty of the last 3 years is that we got to be in practice, in communal practice and individual practice, and now it is a part of us. So in working with children and working with adults too, but working with, my hope is with children and parents, to that I get to pull from my own processing of this practice. And I believe the authenticity of that, instead of this is how you do it, but the authenticity lands deeply in their bodies because they feel that it's in mine. It's that emotional, that calibrating to the nervous system, that emotional contagion piece of I've got you, and I can hold this for you.
Yeah, as you mentioned a little earlier, as you were sharing here about digesting, and I think that's so important because this work that is Resma's work that then he shared, and we had co-facilitators with us, and then we really were invited to digest in our own bodies and to integrate in our own bodies with everyone in this group was a therapist or a coach, so we were all doing some kind of work on our own, in our own world, however that looked, before and during this course. And I really appreciate what you mentioned about you've been allowing it to digest, and now it's in this well, along with a lot of other practices, and like you mentioned, like decades of kind of this growth, healing work of your own, and then it gets to be there to kind of expand the capacity perhaps to hold different experiences, especially with unresourced youth and families as you've been working with.
Yeah.
It feels really powerful and valuable to those
Yeah, when I'm listening to your words, digesting, but also something came up from kind of a previous conversation that we've had, a recent conversation around that, why we do the work, right? Like, why were you in a place years ago to explore the things that you explored? And we have this very similar upbringing, and these things that we have to do, right? We have to become a doctor or an engineer. But then there's this piece of us that really inherently knows that we're meant for something else. I became an architect. Why? Because I could slip it under the radar of engineering. But I really wanted to be something much more creative. The exploration of many decades is because my system knew something was off, right? And then also the word that shows up for me is belonging, right? I didn't, my system knew, my body knew that this isn't where the heart wants to be. And I'm also in a world where it's predominantly white men. And so all of these things, so we talk often about how emotion is I don't want to say just, emotion is information. And we can get wrapped up in the emotion, or we can use it as information to guide us to where we want to be. And I feel that all of these steps, people can say like fate or spirit or anything, but it's this inner wisdom that's guiding you to all these places. And I'm so glad I made the choice to do this work. It was not the path that I was going to take. And one thing happened and it shifted me to resonance work, right?
Mhm.
For the moment that I was going in one direction, and then I had this exchange. It wasn't even my exchange. I was witness to an exchange. And I'm like, oh, let me check this out. And
Mhm.
then I felt it, right? Like I felt that real big yes,
Yeah.
that real big. And so we're on this path of kind of making sense of the world. So we're still that
Yeah.
5-year-old that's like trying to make sense of the world decades later. And then there's something really gratifying around not knowing everything. And there's something really gratifying of having resource around the
Mhm.
port to not to need it, to know everything.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's that
Mhm.
real faith in that I'm held, whether I
Yes.
understand it or know it, or if I don't. So again, going back to both of our cultures, it's a lot about certainty, right? This has to be this way. We're going to go into an analytical field because of this. But there's so much around certainty, and,
Mhm.
and now look at us. Every week we meet, you
Yeah.
guys, and I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but this is what I'm getting. I have this, and then there's humor in it, right?
Yeah.
So in our trauma, the support and the not knowing, and I will say that it's a difficult thing sometimes, and we can still hold it and not laugh at it, but at least laugh and cry, right? Like
Yeah.
and be with it.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So many things and like that were resonating in what you shared. And a reminder again that I know, known, but like that we both have made really big shifts in our paths that started out from that place of, oh, this is acceptable, or this is like where we got some positive reinforcement in some way from the early part of the path until, yeah, so things start happening. You mentioned belonging, you mentioned being held, in the uncertainty. And I'm reminded of, I probably overuse the word powerful, but but how powerful really it is to do this work in community and to share and to like with you and I, and now we have two others in our group. But when you're sharing with other bodies, not to reduce us to just a body, but like with other people who have done this kind of depth of exploration within our own bodies, that how much we can witness, reflect, hold for each other. And that has been just like priceless. It's been transformative for me, like in 1 hour of, because, we've all been doing this some kind of work for years, myself also, like decades of whether it's therapy, whether it's whichever kind of, trying different types of modalities. There's like a band that's gonna come through. This is like the streets of Mexico. But
We said we were going to dance during this episode.
I know, it's like I'm like, it's not difficult, but I'm like, okay, what's going on? There's something in this about what happens when we're not just doing this on our own. And even like with the practitioner that one might hire, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coach, whether that's some kind of healer, but to actually be in a space of really feeling held in the uncertainty, I think a huge part of life,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. You mentioned how many things that we've done, right? We learn from everything, right? Whether it's the right thing for us or, and I've met people along the way, lovely teachers and peers, during all of these types of explorations and courses.
Mhm.
And I feel what's different is the depth of work is so vast, and really to look back on that building of trust and what we really did. And we have been together once a week for almost 3 years doing really deep work. And I feel like it's so different. It's such a different experience than other. I feel like that was the gift. And I feel like even Fresno would say during the actual coursework, he would say, this is a triad thing. Like, go to your triad. And the reliance and the belief of that really is, there's nothing like it. Now it's a quad, but we have that. And we bring to the group of us, um, like so many things, right? And I would say it's resource, but it also is very empowering for whichever one of us is bringing something to the group. So it's not a lean on me type thing. It's let me hold it while you make sense of it.
Yes.
Right? There's agency in that. There's empowerment because it's not in just how it's set up. We are there to witness what is happening. And I agree. I think that just from the fact that all of us have been doing it is vibrationally, I feel there is such, and I said this yesterday, there's such an attunement vibrationally to really drop in and say that difficult things can be brought to the group, to a communal space. I will say, kind of on an interesting flip side of that, as it's kind of just what shows up around children and resource, like my kids will pick the funniest things as resource. And so it's sometimes, I shared before, like standing on grass in their bare feet. That's their resource. And so they thankfully trust me enough, but their resource it feels different to me. Like, I'm going to hold this thing and feel stronger. It's very like, this is my superpower. While I'm holding this thing, I am going to be able to work through this thing. Right. And I love that too. It just seems different. Because I see both sides of it where I'm like, I don't know what that means, but it kept showing up. Like my one kid that wants to like stand on grass while he's doing it. Like, that's cool. Like, right. It's not really he's being held and witnessed, but it's just different. There's something very tangible, like something that needs to be. It's just I never reflected on it too, but that's, I think, somewhat interesting too.
I love that. It's from my previous career or whatever it was, of working with a lot of youth. And I just think that makes so much sense. And it's just like, it has to be like a resource will be something you can touch, you can hold, like something that appears to be not changing, especially in that moment. The grass, it's there, the item in the hands or whatever it is, I mean, it seems it's just definitely very intelligent in that stage of development, right? Like, they're they want something. You're talking about uncertain, or the uncertainties there, like in their life, however it is, but like, okay, the resource is going to be something that we can really grab onto. And then it's interesting now at whatever ages we are, in our group, that we can feel into a invisible, very felt sense, vibrational, like it is tangible in a way, right? That this field that we come together and right away we're there, we're presence, and we're present to each other, and then we're able to receive, like we're able to give and receive in that field. But this is what is so resourceful at a later stage,
And it's a good point. The stages of development. Yes, yeah, yeah. It's like it's it, it feels very sweet to me, like, okay, as long as I'm holding this, I'm safe, right? So they can tap in to something that's safe or not certain.
They're bringing in that aspect because as we practice, with the Nimbasi, this somatic process of sensing into what's present, they're really bringing in a lot of imagination, which is really amazing. Like, okay, this is it. This toy is my resource.
Yeah, yeah, it's really amazing. It is. I've done a lot of somatic work before, and it was incredibly helpful. I won't say with kids in really difficult situations, not having to completely, again, I think it has like a less rigid structure, even though we talk about Vimbasi and we talk about kind of the different kind of the vibration and the images and the meaning and all of these things. So we use that, but if I don't have to present that in the same way with them.
Yeah.
And so it feels much more magical. Like it can be anything. It doesn't have to be the right thing. There's no right thing. And with somatic, processes, I feel like again, it was helpful, but I feel like they were still searching for the right thing. Even though I might be saying there's no right thing, it's whatever. If I look back, and I won't say it for everybody, but like I would say that we're again in this structure, in this system, that there's a right and a wrong. They at young ages are in a place that they know there's a right and a wrong, and have a perceived authority on something. They want to give me right or wrong, where I don't want that, and here it's just so they can have, it sounds really strange to say because it's dealing with difficult things, but they can have fun with it from knowing me so long. Like I come up with not that I come up with the craziest things show up for me. I'm like, what does this mean? So I bring that to them. Some of the stuff it's just like your like inner wisdom just come up with. Yeah.
I can imagine that gives them such permission to explore and like what's coming up for them. What are they seeing something? Are they feeling something? Or some kind of experience that comes up. I can imagine that being very freeing.
Yeah.
Being in that state. Like bringing that play into it. Yeah. I am curious because we have talked about this, but not recently. When you mentioned if I remember correctly, you just mentioned like in the last week or so that something's coming alive again with South Asian women, like bringing this work to that population.
Yeah. I feel like I got hit over the head with that. Not from you, but just like that. Like it really showed up, in a Zimbabwe a couple of years ago, multiple times. And I were looking back at kind of why it went away. Because the mind is sneaky. It really can tell you it's not the right time or it's not. I think that there's truth to it's not the right time. Like things show up the way they're supposed to show up when they show up. And but we need to be paying attention to that. But I also feel that being from the culture that we both are, it really is this very heavy lifting. There's a heavy lifting going on. Mental health is not something that is received well, like kind of focusing on mental health. And that's for other people. When I became a mental health therapist after leaving architecture, the response was so, put it kindly, not okay, right? I will say a lot of love to my parents, but they did not take it well. I think I've shared with you, Sonali, my dad didn't speak to me for a couple years with the shift, and that's how the way I just felt like it was, how much space did I have to really approach that, as I felt it was important. I felt that it was true, and I felt like I might not have any bandwidth to shift or to include, let's say include, because I was going to continue to work with kids the way I do. Then it's been with me for about a week now, and I have to listen to how many times it shows up, right? Even in our time together this week, it showed up, right? And I'm like, I didn't bring it into the conversation, right? Like it was like, so then it feels very strong in my body that I have to do something with it. If I can't quiet it, it doesn't feel quiet in my body. But then I had this moment today where I'm like, okay, I'm just going to send this request to see what shows up around contacting someone that I'm interested in understanding a little bit more, that it's her relationships and what she's putting out in the world in the South Asian community. Then I'll get more information of what to do. And so I feel I'm still in the same place, that it's a tough, it's it, it at least my family system, it's like they're going to be not, it's just not necessarily something that is familiar, but I think it's very loud. I feel it loud in a good way, not loud in an overwhelming way. It's loud.
You know, I appreciate as you're sharing, I like it invites me to reflect a bit on these times when I'm facing difficult. I mean, it's still coming up, of course. But you know, like there's times where it's really like, oh gosh, this is not going to be acceptable. Or, you know, when I kind of go from, oh, I'm like a doctor, and oh, I'm going to be a sensuality coach. It's like it just, but you know, it also reminds me of what we learn and what we have learned in somatic abolitionism, of that the historical, the intergenerational, the pervasive and the persistent, and how that's real. You know, like it's not just, it becomes a bit of like not just us in our little world and stuff, like we're actually now bringing all of this into our bodies to process, to hold, to face, to kind of like, oh God, if I do this, no one's gonna approve of that. Or, you know, all of the many thoughts, at least I've experienced, of like, what are you doing? You know,
Yeah.
does it make sense?
I have this hilarious, a little off topic, but then I kind of want to bring it back to something that we had talked about before we started recording. But I have this hilarious memory of, I used to write poetry, and I remember being with my family probably around 21, 22, and my soon to be brother-in-law, but my brother-in-law now asked me something. I said, oh, I think I'm going to buy a guitar because I have all this poetry and I can't sing, but but I think I can play an instrument, and I'm going to buy a guitar and I'm going to learn how to play the guitar, and I'm going to put all this poetry to music. And the whole room was silent. Like actually everybody in the room, like 10 people, just stopped talking to each other. That's the thing. Just buying a guitar, putting poetry to music. Yeah, you don't do that, right? Like it's just, and so it's not even anybody telling me it's unacceptable. It's just the quiet, right? It's it's the silent something. Can you think of the word, Sonali? This just the silence itself is, I shouldn't be doing this. This is not okay.
Yeah. It's like that, like what was just coming to me is like that deafening silence. Like it's really palpable. what is the vibration of that? What are these other layers of that? When you're in a room and everyone's like talking, laughing, whatever's happening, and then suddenly it's like pin drop silence. It's like, ooh, like that's definitely like I could feel that as such an imprint. I mean, I was a sensitive child. I would have or whatever age, I would have definitely been like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. But to circle back, I thought that was funny. But to circle back to one of the images I got today around this thing about like the tangling of the body. And I had this image of some work I had done years ago around intuitive movement. And so I'd spent 30 days, an hour every morning, allowing kind of the inquiry was, can I allow my body to move on its own without the mind? And and it kept showing up today. I didn't kind of connect it to, like, I couldn't relate it. It kept showing up today around the question, what is alive for you now around somatic burning box? What we discussed before the recording, which I think is really kind of appropriate with where we are now, is that what happened was I had an injury from years ago that wasn't in pain. And what the body did over 30 days when I allowed the mind to just let go, and there's a certain amount of days of the mind getting used to letting go. But in that intuitive movement, the shoulder completely went a different direction and the pain increased. And after day 30, the pain was gone, and actually really gone. Because day one, it was there and I was just ignoring it. Just gotten so familiar with that low grade chronic pain that I believed that there was no pain anymore. And I think that's such a great understanding of what we're talking about, because we have been we're trying to create all these explorations to heal ourselves, right? Like I said, 30 years of just this self-awareness, self-discovery, curiosity, exploration, and then helping others with that. But really, it's such a long, like hundreds of years of patterning. And so even if we don't feel pain because we've done our own exploration, right? We do. We are. It's just because we haven't completely unraveled the whole like that. To me, that's what that image, and that's the beauty of Mbasi. That made no sense to me. But it's this inner wisdom that's saying, can I show you what the answer is? Can I show you like how it's similar? Because it had to kind of really shift gears. And then I had to experience kind of this fresh pain because it hadn't healed. It was just healing based on patterning.
Right.
And so if we move forward in a direction where it's just us trying to heal us, right, then it's going to show up somewhere. So there has to be this piece of like, let this inner wisdom, let this ancestral wisdom help us. It might look like we're going backwards because it's not going to feel good. I shared with you, Sonali, like I had so much intense charge today and the mind felt very busy. But all of that is so important to kind of take stock in and bring to the community and be witness, to allow ourselves to come at it from a different direction and really do healing work for generations. Because we're not just healing now, there's so much coming from behind us forward.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It really speaks to the depth of this work.
And the other thing that shows up is kind of this ability to be somewhat, word that shows up as childlike, right? Because before working, like before this, the whole process, the whole 3-year process that we've been together on this journey, I loved play. You know this. I love play and I love like curiosity and exploring and tracking and like just this understanding of self and guiding others through that. But I feel like this, I kind of get tickled sometimes, right? I feel like we all do, like, right? Like, it's like, even kind of where you find resource, like the exploration of where you find resource. Yeah, I humorously say, like, I feel Resma gave me permission to grunt and to make noise and
Yes.
and, it's, just that modeling his part that it is like, I'm like, that it's like visceral, like I can chant, I can, like all of these things that I was raised in, but like that just very visceral grunting is, I feel like I get to do this, I get to make this sound. And there's something about it that feels, and maybe what I'm speaking to is that as we grow up, and this is that oppressive system, right? Like the white body system, like we toe the line because they're more manageable if we stay in this lane, stay in your lane. And so it's these invitations to run and to get tickled at like what shows up, and it doesn't have to make sense, and all of these things that actually feel like permission to be that free, the freedom that you felt as a child before the white bodied system was really bearing down heavily on us. Yeah. The image of running through a field right now and just feeling the wind that is created by my own forward movement.
I think that really captures something about this essence of burning boxes. It's like in doing so, we get to reclaim or just experience that kind of like childhood innocence, playful, creative vibrancy that it just gets so like, going through life, it just like smashing that down.
Yeah. Yeah, I love you calling this burn the box. I really do. Just from that system. Like, I mean, I still back to kind of how rigid the system is in the life of what's appropriate and what is acceptable. And for my own life of like being, a good Indian daughter and kind of really trying to be that and me. As opposed to
What did
being,
you what did
I
you
said,
just say? Sorry, the words that got swallowed a little.
said being that and
Yes.
me, as opposed to being me and
Yes.
then and that, right? Like, so
Yes.
can I kind of
Yes.
just burn the box and really be me
Yeah.
and be a good daughter, a good, but I'm me. I'm not a version of me that you want me to be, or, like something I was listening to yesterday and today about like the model minority, and like all the pressures of that. And then kind of skipping to, I know I'm skipping a lot, but even like there's so much anger in the kids that I work with because they're not getting to be what they want to be. And so it comes out in such really detrimental ways for them, so they're life altering. Yeah, it's an invitation to feel that liberation that you talk about, like that, I really that we both are talking about, with that childlike freedom, and marrying that with wisdom, with awareness. And also, I think that self-awareness is a really huge advocate of that. And the communal piece of trust for others. Like, I know myself and I am developing trust for the community. I feel is very important, because I can kind of look, there's not, even in own communities, like they're in their own. And we're talking about it right now. Like, do we have trust for what we just talked about in our own family system? Like, it's, yes, we trust that, but do we have trust to be us, right? And to be authentically us. And I will say that for the people that I work with every day, like, that it is within their own community that they don't have complete trust in their own being. And that guides me in this moment that I haven't really explored, but to to really develop that in the community that I work in as well would be amazing, to work individually with people, but then also to have them work within the community would be incredibly powerful.
I'm wondering, because I know that you and I can talk for a very, very long time, but as we kind of bring this to a close, I'm wondering if there's anything that wasn't spoken or that you feel like you want to share that we didn't touch on. And also, if there's anything you want to share about like your work or with people, because I know you're working with people who are interested in leading into somatic abolitionism, how people can find you.
Oh, so something around self-promotion. Again, it's the so I would say that I would love to mention that you and I are working on doing a podcast together. You want to share that? Like, do you want to speak to that a little bit, or do you want to?
I'll say that I'm glad you mentioned it. I was thinking of it actually, but I wasn't going to bring it up unless you brought it up. I will say that I'm really excited about it, and I think it's one of those things that's been evolving and emerging, right, over some time, that we've been like, that you approached me and we've been kind of in communication around having just like something regular where we get to come together and share what we do, kind of like what we talk about a lot of times when we do talk, but just because it is this, we have honed our attunement to each other, and so it allows things to emerge in that space. So
Yeah, same. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to have worked towards a time in my life that there is. I really appreciate, there's so many things that we talk about. If it's just something that we read, and hopefully it's something that is, I was watching something recently where I'm like, does anybody want to listen to this? So I think the podcaster was saying, like, does anybody want to listen to me talk about this? But but it, to me, I always feel like there's like these like jewels of resonance, and that it is something to me that I felt was really important around the work of somatic abolitionism and what shows up, and how to the different things that I was experiencing today, and how I was able to hold that, the different pieces, because of the work that we've done. And then having the ability to talk to somebody about it is so rich. There's such richness to kind of exploring the topic, I think. So yes, I'm excited about the process. Yeah, I'm excited about that. Let's see. So then there's a couple of things that I won't go into it a lot, but I'm like a brain nerd. I love like the science of the brain and how it connects to our experiences, our trauma, our suffering, how it impacts us physically, how it impacts us from a mental health standpoint. And so very exciting. I'm finishing up my neurofeedback certification and very soon, probably by the end of October. And so my hope is I'm developing an organization called Wellness Wala. Wala in Hindi is, people might have heard of Wala, like Chai Wala. He is a tea, the person in charge of tea. So Wellness Wala the intention is that Wala is loosely the one in charge, and wellness, obviously. So it's not me in charge of your wellness, it's you in charge of your wellness. So it's just kind of a combination of all of the things that I do that I'm able to guide, and hopefully it's for all ages, and that I'm able to really help people across the board, regardless of socioeconomic status, really get in charge of their own well-being, especially people that have experienced difficulty in a racialized way. So that's kind of on the map for the next 6 months too. So yeah.
Wellness problem. So beautiful. As we were sharing earlier, we have a name for our podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
That really came, I think, very organically. So emerging from the roots. My business and Instagram is I Am Sacred Ground, and your Instagram is Sunlight Through Trees. Or is it Through the Trees or
Sunlight Through the Trees? Yeah.
Through the Trees. So yeah, this is our collaboration.
A lot of nature and elements.
Yes.
Using that.
The tree and the roots. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening and being a part of the Burn the Box movement.